Welcome to the Better Business, Better Life podcast. Terry DuPont is the founder of DuPont Advisory Group, a group dedicated to providing comprehensive services to successful business owners, medical, and other professionals. Terry has top-of-the-table status in the prestigious International $1 Million Roundtable, placing him among the top 0.1% of all professional financial advisors in the world. Terry's philosophy is, I've learned that I grow and prosper more by focusing on the success of others, rather than fretting over my own. Terry is a certified financial professional with the Institute of Financial Wellness, an advisor for the Power of Zero Taxes in Retirement, chartered retirement plans specialist, certified wealth preservation planner, and certified philanthropic developer. On the podcast, Terry brings together experts in their field who have succeeded in building their business to share their secrets with you. And now, here's your host, Terry DuPont.
Welcome, everyone, to Better Business, Better Life, Building on Your Success. I'm your host, Terry DuPont, and today we are honored to have Troy Weber with us. Troy is a third-generation owner of Chesterfield Auto Parts, which is a self-service auto recycling yard. They've got 100 employees and 3 locations in Richmond, Virginia. And Troy also has a new app that he's built called Yardsmart. And Yardsmart was created to help his business and others like him be more efficient and increase sales margins by automating auto recycling yards, which is very interesting. As the only one of its kind worldwide, Yardsmart is a cloud-based software, and it's a service subscription. It's now available for subscribers and has been awarded the Innovation in Cloud Computing Award by RVA Tech in Richmond, Virginia in 2022 after it was beta tested for 2 years. And Troy, it sounds like you've got a very interesting story, and I'm excited to get to talk with you today. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about you and how and why you started your career?
Gladly, Terry. I'm very proud, like you said, to be the third generation owner of my family's business. My grandfather was working for the junkyard and had the opportunity to buy it from the owner back in the late 1940s.
Wow.
And he continued it to run it as every other junkyard in the 1950s and 60s. And he retired in the mid 1970s and sold the business to my dad, who continued to run it. And they were also both very active in our state trade association and the national association as well. And in the late 80s, my dad decided to take it a little bit different direction with his business and try this self-service model where the customers would go and pull their own parts. And that was a big shift from what we had been doing. And especially at the time in the late 80s, it was a really unique concept that was very, early in its inception. Everybody thought my dad was crazy from going to this new thing where they let the customers go pull the parts off the road cars.
Usually are considered crazy, right?
It is, exactly. The best ideas always are. And so he started that in the late 1980s, and by the mid 90s, it was such a good idea that several other of the big people who were associated and former past presidents of the National Association also thought it was a great idea. And so they partnered up and began building yards and that self-service model all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much kept him busy until he retired in 2008 and sold me the Richmond stores here that we had. He'd opened up his second location in the early 90s. And so in 2008, I bought the 2 stores from my dad. And then in 2013, I had an opportunity to buy our third location, which was an existing junkyard here in the Richmond area. So we acquired our third yard.
Okay. That's very interesting. And I know there was a quote by the founder of Apple that I read one time. Actually, in one of my offices in Warsaw, I have it mounted in a frame, and it's called The Crazy Ones. and it's all about innovation. So
That's right.
might look that up sometime if you have.
I will.
Tell us about Yardsmart. I'm really interested in learning about that.
Sure. The business that we're in is a niche market. Junkyards are a fairly unique business. And our version, the self-service model, is an even more niche market in an already niche market. A very small segment of the population is doing this self-service model like we're trying. And the alternative is a full service or late model based business, which is far more low margin. High margin, low volume. They buy a few cars a month and try to make thousands of dollars on each vehicle. And it's far more business to business oriented. It's body shops, it's mechanics and dealers trying to buy late model insurance parts for insured vehicles. My version of the business is much more high volume, low margin. We're buying a lot more cars for a lot less money and making a smaller margin, but we're replacing that with a higher volume. So I'm doing 1,000 cars a month, and these full service late model businesses are doing close to 100 cars a month. And the other version is much more dependent on a software. The software that they're using in these business models tells them what cars to buy, how much to pay for them. They tell them what parts to pull off and how much to sell them for. And furthermore, the software that they're using even facilitates the selling of the part. It lists the parts online, and it allows and facilitates other yards to be able to buy the parts that those businesses have listed. The other version is what I'm doing is self-service, strictly retail. We do not inventory any parts. We don't have anything on the shelf. And so as the industry is starting to change to more of the self-service model that I've been doing, because it's so much easier to run, you don't have to be concerned with how many parts you're going to sell off the car as much as how much material you're going to be recycling from the cars. 75% of the revenue my business makes comes from recycling the metals, not selling parts. So as the businesses are shifting over the past 10 years, probably longer than that, Terry, I've seen a significant change in the number of auto recyclers who are abandoning that late model, high margin model and making the switch over to that self-service, low margin, higher volume model that I'm adopting. And so the companies that we're trying to make the switch are coming into it and saying, okay, what software do I get to run my business now? They've been used to having this key software that was essentially running their entire business for them. And so they're looking at my version of the business and say, okay, what business, what software should we use? And there has been a very distinct lack of software options in this space for quite a while. There are other providers out there that are specifically in the self-service software business, but it's a local area network, on-site server, older technology base that's hasn't made a lot of improvements. We'd been considering the software options, and the only option out there was not viable for us. All three of my stores share customers. We share tickets. We're close enough that you can go to store A and return that part at store B and share tickets. And the current software option did not have that as a function. And so we just set out and said, look, instead of trying to make something work that's not going to work, I don't want to force this square peg into this round hole. We'll just make a round hole. And so that's what I did. We set out, and I'm smart enough to identify. My dad told me you're an automobile recycler, not a computer programmer. So hire somebody to do it for you. Just like accountants. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a doctor. I don't do my own accounting. We hired a firm here in the Richmond area called Simple Thread, and they really specialized in doing this kind of stuff, working with small local businesses to create a piece of software that was, needed in the industry as a whole. They've been doing a lot of work with rental properties and healthcare companies and that kind of thing. So we worked with them to create a really nice piece of software.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little more about your journey from purchasing the auto parts yards to becoming CEO of Yardsmart, and what motivated you? I know you touched on that. It sounds like what motivated you outside of what you might have already said to start Yardsmart?
Back in the early 2000s, we found ourselves in a very similar situation. But even then, there were no options. In the late 90s, we were using some software that wasn't designed to do what we were doing it with. I'm sure this is familiar to a lot of people in our industry because there just was no software designed for the self-service industry. We were using some other version of a cash register program and kind of making it work. But it was a 1990s version of a remote operated system, and it was just the bane of our existence. We'd spend more time fussing with the computer than we would selling parts. And so we then at that point got with a local, just individual programmer who made a piece of software for us in a really antiquated language, but worked for us. It was a great deal for us, Terry. We had this dedicated guy. He made our own unique software. Anything that we wanted to do, this guy would make it happen for us. And we were really lucky that we had that relationship. And even then, we had several different people around the country who liked that software. We didn't create it with the intention of selling it, But there was such a shift in the industry to the self-service market that we still had a couple people who were buying and using that program of software back in the 2000s. Unfortunately, that friend of ours, he passed away after a very short and sudden battle. And so we were really left stuck. And we had to look at our current situation and say, look, are we better off modifying our old system, or do we just start again? And we were very lucky that we were able to buy all the source codes and have a good analysis by a computer programmer who looked at all of the information and said, look, the amount of money and time that it would take to convert this old system, convert into a new system, you could design 3 new modern systems for that. And so we really just at that point said, look, I guess we're just going to have to bite the bullet and start again. And that's when we contacted Simple Thread. They said, look, in 2020, which is when we started doing all of this, it would be foolish to try to create a new software with an on-site local area network server, that you got to spend $10,000 every 3 years. And it's just, that's not the way to do this. It's software as a service is the way to go now. It's a website. Anybody who can access the internet can access your software. It's a monthly subscription type of a revenue stream, which is much, much easier to manage and maintain. And it's a whole lot more compliant for customers too. A customer who has a local area network server on site, it's expensive. They're not going to be willing to just get rid of it. It has to be constantly maintained. And that functionality between multiple stores doesn't exist, at least not as easily as a cloud-based function. And so that was the thing that really convinced us there would be no way to do this except in a cloud-based type of setting.
Gotcha. Okay. What challenges, or specific challenges, I should say, did you encounter during the beta testing phase of Yardsmart, and how'd you overcome them?
I've heard this said about firefighters, but it certainly applies to junkyard employees too. There's 2 things that people hate: change and the way that it is. So as miserable as our employees were using our antiquated software, it was definitely a challenge trying to convince everybody to do it a new way. I think, Terry, one of the best decisions that we made when we were designing this thing is to incorporate the people who were on the counter in the creation of the software. So, I can sit here in my office and create what I think is a great piece of software all day long, and then I give it to the people on the sales counter. They're like, "What idiot made this?" So we were very wise and very conscious about making sure that we involved our cashiers, our sales managers, our inventory personnel, the people who were going to be using it. Were very integral into not only designing it, but also that beta testing. When we were saying, look, okay, guys, how do we want to have our point of sale? How are we going to bring in vehicles? How do you guys want to, put the vehicles through the various processes? Because as you can imagine, we have to do a lot of environmental stuff for these vehicles. And so that is really the best way that we found to overcome that. And it is a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It still was a challenge. Even the people who helped create it, it's a change. And people had been used to ringing it up, and they had found ways to get around the old system and found ways to make it work. And despite the fact that the new way was a better, newer, shinier way, it was still a different amount of clicks. It was still a different button. And so that was the biggest way. And we're lucky that at least it was designed around my exact yard. One of my favorite things about this job is going and visiting other people's junkyards, because look, I didn't create the way that we process cars. My dad didn't invent, how we process cars. Everybody has to do it a little bit different way. And I always learn something by visiting other people's yards. And I always am thrilled to have people come visit my location too, because generally they're going to take away something from it. And I don't consider these people my competitors. We all do things a little bit different way. And so, I was lucky that at least our team got to learn the way that the system was designed to maximize the efficiency of my individual operation.
Gotcha.
And that's probably been one of the biggest challenges that we've seen, Terry, in introducing and rolling out the software to other self-service users in the industry. They've all got their own way of getting the process done. And my way isn't necessarily the exact way that they want to do it.
Right.
So not only have we been struggling by introducing this new piece of software from a startup guy, it makes the other yard users step back and look at it and evaluate, how do we get the skin off the cat? Is this the best way to do it? This guy, Troy Weber's telling me to do it a whole different way. So not only are we having to change the people on the counter's mind, but to a large extent, we're having to change the mind of the business owners, which I can tell you is not easy to do.
Right.
I don't want anybody telling me that my way is wrong.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. It's hard to change people when they're set in their ways. It really is.
Absolutely.
How do you ensure that Yardsmart remains innovative and continues to meet the evolving needs of the auto recycling business?
That is a good question, Terry. And to be honest, that is probably the one thing that sets our technology apart from the others. And one of the biggest complaints that I'd been hearing for years before is that the software out there is old and antiquated. It's using old technology, and they haven't made any kind of improvements to it. They haven't made any kind of updates to facilitate the modern technology that is out there now. They haven't taken advantage of that. And that has been the biggest complaint from users now. It's the exact same product that they bought 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And so that was something that I was very conscious of when we were going through and creating Yardsmart. It needed to be adaptable. It needed to be, constantly improving. And all the information and feedback that we're getting from our clients, I want to be able to make those changes in the product so that they don't get disenfranchised by it and start looking for other options.
Okay. Gotcha. That's interesting. And I'm kind of embarrassed a little bit to ask this next question because I think I know the answer for sure,
Okay.
but I could be wrong, and I want everybody to know what the answer is. Did you grow? I guess my question is how did you become an expert in the business, and did you grow up in the yards?
I absolutely did. Yes. I was very lucky to grow up as a kid in the junkyard. And my mom always said I was born with gears in my head. So I come by it naturally. But yeah, no, I was out here driving cars around the junkyard when I was 5 or 6 years old and working on cars. And so I have a passion for it. I have an interest for it. There's nothing I'd rather be doing. And my dad was also very smart. And said, look, he told me, Terry, when I was a kid, he said, look, you don't have to buy the junkyard. You don't need to be a junkman. If you want to go be a lawyer or a pilot or a doctor, by all means. In fact, my sister is a veterinary cardiologist, has never worked in the business. And my parents and I are also just as proud of her. But a long time ago, I had a lot of pride in the family business, and I was really interested in cars and decided this was something that I wanted to do. So my dad was very interested in making sure that I was involved in the business. I was there during the years where he was opening yards around the country. I did go to college, but not in order to get a degree. I just went to get all of the economics, the accounting, the business administration, the business law courses. So I left with the only thing I needed to get a degree was physical education and electives. So we both decided, why spend another year and a half and all this money in physical education and electives to get a piece of paper I don't need anyway. I learned everything I needed to know and learn the rest from my dad. That was really the most important thing. You can go to economics class to learn how
greater knowledge than anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. I needed to come to work for my dad to learn how the automobile recycling industry works. I've been working, I started officially on the company payroll in October of 95 when I turned 16 and I could drive myself to work. But my sister and I have been collecting hubcaps out here for a nickel a piece since we could walk. We've always been working in the yard, just not officially on the books. So there's nothing else I'd rather do. I can't imagine what job I could do that would allow me to, yeah.
And that you're blessed to love what you do. I experience it myself. I don't
Absolutely.
even see myself retiring because I don't know what else to do.
Exactly. What would I do if I didn't? Yeah,
I can't play that much golf.
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm a big skier, and there's only skiing half a year. What would I do the rest of the time? So,
When I was young, I was pretty poor at golf. Yeah. And now that I've got older, I'm not young anymore.
yeah.
What strategies, Troy, do you employ to raise awareness for Yardsmart and attract new subscribers?
Yeah. We have a really unique situation with Yardsmart because it's such a niche industry within a niche industry. There's no point because I'm lucky that I have a strong retail business that has a lot of retail experience as well. So I have a lot of experience in how to market a business and how to have an advertising program, and the digital marketing is something that we put a lot of time, money, and effort into for our retail junkyard business here in the Richmond area. And one of the things that I realized very quickly with Yardsmart is that same type of advertising has no application in this business to business niche market kind of thing. So I really struggled to learn how do we market this thing. And the only way that I found is to just get out there into the industry conventions and put the name out there, going to trade shows and that kind of thing, and having a booth there and learning the name. So before we even had the product out available and finished for that matter, we were going to national trade shows and that kind of thing, just to get the name out there and building interest in, oh, what is this Yardsmart? Oh, for self-service yards, that kind of thing. But then by the time we, I'd show up at all the state shows too. Anytime a state would have the local, like the Virginia Auto Recyclers or the New York Auto Recyclers, I was going to all the state level shows as well, putting my name out there with my face, whatever kind of bona fides I had built up over the past couple of years. People recognized me and my dad, and they were interested in what we were talking about and what we had to offer. And just over the years, it's not been easy. We've been marketing Yardsmart for 2 or 3 years now. We're just starting to get to where we're bringing on a couple new clients a month. So it has taken some time. It's a very intensive finding the periodicals and the magazines and the newspapers and things like that are specific for our industry and trying to advertise in those as much as I can. But to be honest with you, Terry, I have been blown away by how many new subscribers we're getting just by people Googling us. We don't do any kind of Google advertising at all. We put nothing into any kind of Google ad campaigns for this thing, but probably 60% of the new calls that we get, people just Googled Yardsmart or junkyard software of some kind. So we're trying to, create websites and do things to maximize our digital footprint, since at this point it's all just organic traffic that's been finding us. So, but it has been a very unique thing to try to, shift from this highly regional retail mindset that I've been working on for 25 years to now completely going in the other direction and business to business, non-retail, don't do any kind of TV and radio advertising. So it has been a shift. I've learned a lot.
Troy, what is something now that you wish you knew when you started?
I cannot do it all myself. I think that was one of the things I thought when my dad retired. It was like, all right, now I get the big office. I'm going to come in and call all these shots and tell everybody what to do and make all these decisions by myself. And I guess it was a year or two later, I'd gotten married and I had to put off my honeymoon because I had 3 stores now. And I was just worried about, man, I don't know if I can be gone for 10 days. I'm going to have to be on the phone the whole time. And my dad said, son, if you can't leave to go for your honeymoon for 10 days and worry about whether the business is going to collapse, then you're doing something wrong. You need to have managers and people running your businesses for you so that you can focus on the business itself. There was another person who I have a lot of credit, that I give a lot of credit to, who said, you need to be working for the business, not in the business. You know what I mean? As the manager, as the owner of your company, if you're out there working on the counter, answering phones and selling parts, you're not able to focus on the growth and the future of the business and what's going to come next and try to expand. And so that was something I really took to heart. I've always had a really good management team. I think that was the thing that kind of made me say, give them some of the reins. Don't be nervous. If the person that you have in charge isn't able to manage the store in your absence, maybe they're not the person you should have in charge. Right. So I was really lucky that the folks that I had managing were perfectly capable. I just had to give them the opportunity.
There you go. There, live and learn, right?
Absolutely.
They were there all along. Just have to give trust them.
It is. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is give trust to your family business to people that aren't in your family. But I've been very lucky. I've been very blessed to have really good people working for me.
Can you discuss for a moment any future plans or developments for Yardsmart and how you envision its growth in the coming years?
I would love to see Yardsmart get a bigger piece of that self-service pie. I recognize that it is a small industry. And while I mentioned that there is a lot of transition into this industry, it's going to take a long time. There's a lot of variables coming down from the automobile industry. One of the only constants in this industry is change. Car companies go to great lengths to make sure that every year they're putting out an entirely different product. And so the challenges of recycling the actual automobiles themselves is something that I'm anxious to see. I'm anxious to see what my 11-year-old son is going to be dealing with in 20 years, but hopefully he's at the helm. What electric vehicles and the potential of hydrogen powered or alternative fuel vehicles are going to be bringing to our industry.
Right.
And so, fortunately, we've made Yardsmart adaptable enough to be able to be flexible and modify it to be able to adapt to the industry. Really, one of the biggest things that we've done over the past year or so, Terry, is the onboarding and bringing in, collaborating with other technologies and softwares that are in the industry. That's really one thing that Yardsmart is being able to shine above the rest. Being cloud-based makes it very easy for other technologies to work integrated with Yardsmart. It's all about APIs. It's all about that back end access, and that's not something that is doable on a local area network server. So we've been able to incorporate several other technologies for core pricing, for catalytic converter pricing, for recalls, customer retention modals, all kinds of type technologies that are in this business now, that are already in the industry. Other trade show tables that I see when I go to these things, I'm able to actually bring in and make Yardsmart more valuable for the customers and bring value to those businesses as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So you actually partner with them in some cases then.
Absolutely. Yes. For lack of a better term, we are being able to supply our Yardsmart customers with their pricing natively in the software. And there's core companies out there who love this concept because they're giving their pricing right there at the time that they're buying the car. The customers can see how much potential revenue they can make off the car, even if the customers don't sell their price.
Gotcha.
That's part, so.
Yep. As president of Chesterfield Auto Parts and being CEO of Yardsmart, how do you manage your time and responsibilities effectively between the two companies?
Mhm. I had to dedicate certain times for each store. Usually what I try to do is like Mondays and Fridays, I will leave open so that I can do whatever I need to. Those are also good travel days. If I need to go visit a new yard or if there's a convention or something like that, the Friday and Monday generally. And then I'm dedicating times of the week to my other businesses.
Mhm.
All my managers know that at Tuesday at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be visiting your store. I want to have an hour-long meeting with you so that we can talk about what we need to talk about. So it's really being able to allocate focused time for each of my businesses and each of my interests. That way I'm not falling behind and allowing things to spiral out of control before all of a sudden a month later, I'm like, oh my gosh, what has been going on for a month? It's very important to be able to stay on top of all the businesses to make sure that everything is staying on track.
Exactly. Exactly. Good idea. Good thoughts. Troy, how do you define success?
I think achieving the goals that you set out for. If you set out to become um, whatever you want, it needs to be an achievable goal. I can't set my goal to be an astronaut or something that's not attainable or realistic. It's being able to identify what you think is a realistic, achievable goal for yourself. I'm never going to be an NBA basketball star. I'm never going to be an astronaut, but I know what I'm good at. I know what I enjoy I know what I enjoy. And so being able to set goals in the areas that I'm interested in that I can achieve gives me that sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. Again, sure, I'd love to be a rich millionaire, but am I going to be a millionaire from recycling cars and selling junkyard software? Probably not. Maybe. But it's not like I'm going to feel dejected or like I failed if I don't become a millionaire from selling software. The fact that we've created a product that is useful to me, I can sell it to nobody else and still feel that we've accomplished what we set out to do in 2020. So
Good deal. Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience that we haven't talked about?
Terry, like I said, I think it's my biggest piece of advice is that you can't do it all yourself. You really need to have trust and faith and give the people who are working for you the opportunities to succeed. Like we were just talking about a second ago. If you set these lofty goals for your employees and your management team that are just unachievable and unattainable, it makes them feel like they are a failure if they can't achieve those goals. So yes, we do need to be making improvements in our business, but I don't need to double our revenue over the previous month as long as we're making a steady increase. And I think that one of the things I would piggyback on that is the metrics and the KPIs that we're using are very important to the business. However, take it with a grain of salt. Those things should be used as gauges, not absolute values. Does that make sense? If I'm looking at the KPIs and comparing them. Today's the first of the month, so it's a great opportunity to be looking at the numbers and comparing it to how have we done to this point last year, how have we done for the same quarter, how have we done, and it's not necessarily a failure if every single one of those haven't doubled. We just want to be able to see a steady increase or be able to evaluate those KPIs, like I said, as a gauge. The number itself is not as important as the trends of what those numbers are doing.
Agree. Agree. Thank you for that. With everything you've done and your success that you've had, what do you see as your biggest challenge going forward?
I think staying up with technology. There's so much changing both in the automotive sector and especially in the software sector. As I said before, new technologies and things that are coming out in automobiles, and consumers are demanding that there be in their automobiles, that I'm not sure the automotive industry is ready for, and I'm not sure that the metals and the rest of the industry is ready for. Copper is a really good example right now. Copper is essential for the electrification of the country that we're heading down. And there is not enough copper to facilitate all the electrification that we want to do. And being able to understand technology and what the future of the metals market is going to be, and how the automotive industry is going to respond to all that, is a huge thing that I pay attention to, because that's the long term. That's the 10, 20-year outlook for the industry, as opposed to what is next month's sales going to look like, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And things change so fast anymore.
Absolutely.
And more tense. So
it really does.
Yeah, Troy, we've got your contact information down at the bottom here of the screen, but where can our audience go to learn more about you? Anything specific you'd like to add?
I do have a pretty robust LinkedIn page, and yardsmartapp.com is where we have our public Yardsmart website. Also, Chesterfield Auto Parts has a pretty good digital platform and footprint. If people want to find out about me or my companies, there's plenty of ways to find out.
Awesome. We're going to wrap things up, Troy. Gosh, I really enjoyed having you on. I tell you what, I learned so much from doing these interviews, especially this one. I'd never thought about the metals issue and all that, but interesting stuff. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this week's show. Again, my name is Terry DuPont. I'm the host of Better Business, Better Life, Building on Your Success. And remember one thing, ladies and gentlemen, it's the best way to predict the future is to create it. See you next week.
This has been the Better Business, Better Life, Building on Your Success podcast. If you have questions about creating tax-free wealth and income, forward-looking tax mitigation, strategic risk mitigation, wealth preservation and legacy planning, and advanced financial management, go to DuPontAdvisory.com or email Terry@DuPontAdvisory.com.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.